You were looking at some of the first pictures of what's going on right now at Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. Tents are going up and more migrants are transported to the base this weekend, and they are going to continue to do so. You and the president have said repeatedly that the worst of the worst will be held at Guantanamo. There are a few dozen people there already, I believe. They're right now being held in cells formerly used to house terror suspects. So can you give more specifics about who's there right now, what crimes have they committed, and how long you're going to detain them?
So there are several planes that have transported individuals to the base, and they are in the system and the facilities that, a lot of our worst terrorist criminals have been incarcerated for many years. These individuals are the worst of the worst that we pulled off of our streets.
Who are they?
Murderers, rapists. When I was there, I was able to watch one of the flights landing and them unload about 15 different of these criminals. Those were mainly child pedophiles, those that were out there trafficking children, trafficking drugs, and were pulled off of our streets and put at this facility.
You're building tents for a lot more than, how many are there now?
Well, they're putting up tents that will have the capacity to go up to 30,000 people. That's not stood up yet because a lot of our soldiers that's got there received orders just days ago. I think they've been putting up facilities for the last 5 days.
There are lots of different sort of buckets of people, if you will. You're right now talking about, as you say, again, the worst of the worst, people who you say committed crimes, but it's still unclear how, first of all, whether there are 30,000 people who fit that description.
Right, correct.
Are there?
We are going through the process of identifying those that are on our radar. The president committed during the campaign that he believed we needed to have mass deportation. So we're going after those that have been the violent criminals perpetuating crimes in our communities, also those with final removal orders, and then we'll continue down the priority list.
And will they be held in the tents?
It's potentially, but we're going to keep people safe too. So it depends on how dangerous they are and how they act in these facilities. So we have beds in the United States today that we're using and will continue to use that are ICE detention facilities, but we've got a lot of local law enforcement, a lot of communities and states that want to partner with us too, saying we have facilities if you would like to partner. And I think that's fantastic because that's really what we need is the federal government working with those local officials because they know where these dangerous criminals are.
I just want to ask you about that before I move on. There are reports that ICE is over capacity.
There have been reports, but remember, we're continuously busing people back to Mexico, continuously flying people out of the country and repatriating them back to their. So there's still room, absolutely.
The Lincoln-Riley Act requires you at the DHS to detain individuals who have been charged with but not convicted of nonviolent crimes like theft or shoplifting. ICE, you talked about ICE facilities, it comes and goes, but at some point they're likely to be at capacity. So could those people end up at Guantanamo?
I don't know what the president will decide as far as utilizing it. We want to have the capacity. The facilities will look different.
Exactly.
They certainly will not be used if in these prison systems. We have different camps at Guantanamo Bay, different levels of incarceration. We will have some facilities that will be up to the same standards as other detention facilities in the United States. And I don't think the president's going to tie his hands on what he needs to do to make sure that America is safe.
A lot of this, as you said, the timeline for how long people are going to be there depends on whether or not anybody's going to take them.
Right.
So it could be that some people are going to be there indefinitely.
What's interesting to me is the previous administration knew who these people were that were committing these crimes. They knew where these folks that had final removal orders were in our country, could have negotiated agreements with these other countries to take them back home and didn't. And we saw countries like Venezuela release their prisons and their mental health
what are you doing
individuals
now?
to come to the United States.
Are you comfortable that you're going to be able to not keep them there indefinitely?
I'm super thrilled that Secretary of State Rubio has been actively going out and negotiating, taking people home. So that's part of all the decisions on when we identify people in communities. As soon as we're able to go get them and return them back home as quickly as possible. So my goal is that people are not in these facilities for weeks and months. My goal is that there's a short-term stay. They're able to go incarcerate them, take them, follow the process, and get them back to their country.
That's your goal, but
yes.
You're not ruling out that they could be there for weeks.
I'm not going to rule that out because we are going to continue to make sure that we're talking with every single country, but it's not an option for us to leave people here illegally anymore. American citizens have been put behind people who have chosen to come and break our laws, and that's not going to happen anymore.
Immigration is one of the parts of it, and FEMA is another. On X this morning, Elon Musk said, quote, FEMA is broken, and he said so in response to the suggestion that he shut down FEMA entirely. FEMA is, of course, funded by Congress, has repeatedly been authorized in statute, including by laws you voted for when you were in Congress. Can and should Donald Trump shut it down?
He can, and I believe that he will do that evaluation with his team, and he's talking about it, which I'm grateful for. He'll work with Congress, though, to make sure that it's done correctly and that we're still there to help folks who have a terrible disaster or crisis in their life. He's been very clear that he still believes there's a role for the federal government to come in and help people get back up on their feet. But there's a lot of fraud and waste and abuse out there. And since President Trump has taken over and come back into this administration, we've seen incredible changes.
What's your recommendation to him?
You know, he's talked a lot about doing block grants to states and to local officials. I was a governor, and when I was governor of South Dakota, we saw 12 different natural disasters that hit our state and that were FEMA related, that we had FEMA disasters. So I know it from that level, and I knew every single time that I and the local county emergency management directors, the mayors, the city councils, and the county commissioners, they made way better decisions than the people in Washington, D.C.
If the president came to you and said, you're my DHS secretary, do you think I should get rid of FEMA? Excuse me, get rid of FEMA, what would you say?
I would say yes, get rid of FEMA the way it exists today. We still need the resources and the funds and the finances to go to people that have these types of disasters like Hurricane Helene and the fires in California. But you need to let the local officials make the decisions on how that is deployed so it can be deployed much quicker, and we don't need this bureaucracy that's picking and choosing winners.
You mentioned Congress. USAID is an example, and there are others that I mentioned, that the Consumer Protection Bureau, that are also deemed by statute to be the law. They were put in place and kept in place by Congress.
And off mission. Unbelievable what USAID
But you're saying right here that Elon Musk and you are not just going to go in and say, we're getting rid of FEMA, you're going to do it with Congress?
Well, the president has been clear, too, that he wants to still help people. But what happened by targeting individuals, helping some people and not others, listen, the president just in the last 5 days has closed 80% of the open cases in North Carolina. It's amazing when you have somebody who cares how quickly the response can be. And that wasn't the way that it was under the previous administration. There's people that had wildfires 8 years ago in the western United States still haven't received their FEMA payments. How are people supposed to pick up their...
I took a trip with the FEMA director.
Oh, you did?
She cared.
Well, what I appreciated about her, because when North Carolina got hit, South Dakota did as well. She did come. And I think showing up is a big portion of what needs to have happen.
I do want to ask a couple of quick questions. The Washington Post is reporting that Musk and his DOGE team have access to FEMA's sensitive disaster data, which includes personal information about tens of thousands of disaster victims. Have you authorized Elon Musk and his team to have access to Americans' personal data that is housed inside DHS?
Yeah, we're working with them at the president's direction to find what we can do to make our department much more efficient. So I think it's important. This is essentially an audit of the federal government, which is very powerful and needs to have happen. That agency, and one of the things I've been very clear to the appropriators in the Senate and the House is, please give me the authority to reprogram funds. There's funds
but that's different from him having access to personal data that is housed in.
The president has authorized him to have access.
And you feel comfortable with that?
Absolutely.
I remember a time when Republicans were very careful about and worried about the government, particularly unelected people.
Well, we can't trust our government anymore.
Having access to personal data.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
You are the government.
Yes, that's what I'm saying, is that the American people now are saying that we have had our personal information shared and out there in the public.
But now Elon Musk has access to it.
Yeah, but Elon Musk is part of the administration that is helping us identify where we can find savings and what we can do. And he has gone through the processes to make sure that he has the authority.
So you're totally
the president has
comfortable
granted
with it.
him. I am today by the work that he's doing by identifying waste, fraud, and abuse. And his information that he has is looking at programs, not focusing on personal data and information.
Not focusing on it, but he has access to it.
We'll be continuing to talk to him about what all he has access to. But this audit needs to happen to make sure that we are going through a process that adds integrity back into these programs. And people's personal information has been out there in these caseworks that have been closed for a long time, that people are getting responses now that they haven't had before.
Last